the chat pod as well. And then finally, if you would like to, and you need to access tech support, you can simply send us a tech support request via email to millfamellen@gmail.com. Beyond that, please let us know if there's anything else you need as we get set up this morning. But most of all, thank you once more for joining us. We're very pleased to have you with us, and we look forward to beginning today's session here in just a few minutes. Kelly, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to hop in today. Good morning and welcome to those of you who have joined us in the past few moments. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We still have about 8 or 9 minutes before we get started here at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to turn your attention briefly to a few pre-webinar announcements we have available for you here on the welcome slide. First of all, you can download the slides and resources we have available in support of today's webinar on our event page. This is your one-stop shop for all things concerning today's webinar. Also, do note that we will be providing a recording of today's webinar, and then it will be posted to the event page within 24 to 48 hours concluding today's session, or following today's session, pardon me, in case you need to go back and review any of this information or share it with colleagues or clients who may be interested. Additionally, we have the chat pod available for you if you have any comments or questions for our presenter team as we go through today's webinar. And then finally, if you need to access tech support, please send us a tech support request via email at milfamln@gmail.com. Beyond that, if you wish to say hello, let us know where you're joining us from. You can do so in the chat pod. We do look forward to hearing from you there throughout today's session for comments and questions as well. And just a brief note regarding the chat pod, if you are sharing comments and questions, we'd invite you to select the all panelists and attendees response option from the drop-down menu right above where it says type message here. This just ensures everyone's able to view your comments and questions as we go through and facilitates a more robust understanding and conversation today. So thank you again for tuning in. We'll get started here in just a few moments. Thank you everyone so much for taking the time to join us in the chat pod. Say hello and let us know where you're joining us from. We've got quite the global audience, everyone from across the US to Caserma Erle in Italy and all over. So thank you, regardless of the time of day, for taking the time to join us today for our live session. We still have a few moments before we get started today. So if you'd like to take the remaining time before we begin to download the slides and resources we have available for you in support of today's session, you can find those on our event page. We'll post that link to the chat pod here momentarily. Uh, Many of you have already successfully located the chat pod, so we do invite you to join us there throughout today's session for comments and questions as we go through today's very timely topic of back to school and social distancing in the context of special needs students. Finally, if you should need to access tech support, you can send us a tech support request directly to our MFLN Gmail address, which is listed here on the welcome slide in purple. Beyond that, please let us know if you need anything else as we get set up this morning and begin here in just a couple of minutes. But mostly, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We're very pleased to have you with us today. Good morning and welcome, or perhaps good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Coral Owen. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for the Military Families Learning Network, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's session on special needs and social distancing as we begin this new school year. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully you're currently able to view the slides we're sharing. If you can't see them or having any other technical difficulties, please shoot us a tech support request via email to milfamln@gmail.com. We'll also place this email address in the chat pod for your convenience in just one moment. As many of you have already done, we do look forward to having you join us in the chat pod today for conversation and questions, as well as hellos. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversations, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You should then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen, and then from there you can simply select the chat bubble icon. When typing your comments and questions, we'd like to invite you to select the All Panelists and Attendees Response option. This is available right above where it says Type Message here in the drop-down menu. This just ensures everyone is able to view your comments and questions in the chat pod and facilitates a better understanding and conversation as we go through today's webinar. We will also be covering evaluation and continuing education information at the end of today's session, so do stay tuned straight through till the end. The Military Families Learning Network is part of a DoD USDA partnership for military families, and our passion is to connect military family service providers and cooperative extension professionals to research and to each other through innovative online programming. I'll now turn things over to my colleague, Rachel Browner with the MFLN Military Caregiving Team to introduce today's presenter. Rachel?
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We have several folks on not only on our Zoom platform, but also our YouTube live channel. So we appreciate you guys attending. We have a lot of folks from all over, so thank you for staying up later or working a little bit longer today or getting up early with us today. So I appreciate it. As Coral mentioned, please continue typing any comments, questions in our chat pod. That's going to be our way to communicate with our presenter today. And also, if you haven't already done so, let us know where you're joining us from. I appreciate everyone kind of giving us a little bit of background as to who they are and where they're located. It makes this platform a little bit more personable for us all. And for those of you that are on YouTube live, do the same thing. It's a way for us to get to know you, and we'll make sure to get any of your questions on YouTube Live as well as the Zoom platform to our presenter. So thank you. I am so excited to present today's webinar presenter. She is not new to our Military Families Learning Network. Dr. Lakshmi Mahadevan has done several presentations for us focusing on individuals with special health care needs. And so today's session, we're going to be looking at back to school, special needs, and social distancing. And for many of us that are joining today, at least here in Texas, today is the first day of school for a lot of our individuals. And so it seems like a very appropriate webinar and topic for this time of year. Dr. Mahadevan has a PhD in educational psychology with an emphasis in career development education from Texas A&M University. Her areas of expertise include career assessment, post-secondary options for individuals with special needs, special education, and multicultural career counseling. As Associate Professor and Extension Specialist in Special Populations, Dr. Mahadevan has over 10 years of experience in conducting face-to-face and online professional development with educators in the state of Texas addressing various special population-related issues, particularly in students with disabilities and English language learners. Her other activities include program evaluation, conducting workshops and presentations, preparing newsletters, creating webcasts and special interest web materials, maintaining and supervising the design of online modules, websites, and liaison with stakeholders and experts, and providing technical assistance. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass over the reins to Dr. Mahadevan.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. It's a real honor and pleasure for me to be here. I'd like to thank the Military Families Learning Network for allowing me to do this session and giving me this opportunity to talk on this very serious and pertinent topic. I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety out there that with regard to going back to school in general, but then when we talk about our parents or guardians who are needing to ensure that their child with special needs is able to go back in a safe and have a healthy learning environment. I'm sure the anxiety must be ratcheted up. So my hope is that some of you will be able to get some guidance from my presentation today, give you some guidelines, give you some tips and some strategies on how you can have that conversation with parents. Basically, we want them to now continue to remain advocates, but then we want them to become a little bit more strategic in the way they advocate for their children as they go back to school. So I'm hoping that's what you'll be able to pick up today. Feel free to let me know on the chat pod if you have any questions or any comments, and I try to address them as we move along, as well as do take advantage of the downloads that we have provided for you today. I've included on there a quick reference checklist, just a one pager that'll be easy for you to use with parents and guardians. Just hand it over to them and they can look at it and just go back and revisit some of the talking points from today, as well as make sure that they have access to some additional resources that I have on there so that they can continue to educate themselves on how, as this year unfolds. So today we're going to talk about essentially social distancing. And so there might be many definitions of that. And I really would encourage parents and guardians to really check with their school as to what that means in their situation to begin with. However, in terms of the actual presentation today, I'm going to give you some tips on how we can get our parents to do some self-assessments at this point in their child's careers and going back to school. I also want them to think about how they can plan for another school closure might be or a long-term absence from schools. We're going to look at some IEP questions, that's individualized education program, and some questions that parents can ask specifically with regard to the IEPs. We're going to look at some resources and appropriate services that they can access at this point. And we want to plan for children specifically who have health issues at this point, and I mean by this physical health issues, and how they can continue to stay engaged and advocate for their child. So before we do this, I'd like you to go ahead and check in with me on this today. I want you to check your own batteries, and I want you to think about using this exercise with your parents and guardians when you have that conversation with them. I think now more than ever, it is so important for all of us to have a little bit more of a handle on how we are feeling, both physically as well as mentally, and that we are feeling um, a, we are at a place where we feel energized and we are feeling healthy and okay to do our daily job, as well as then support parents in doing that. So I'd like you to tell me how you're currently feeling. What's your battery like? So if your battery is at the highest, the dark purple level, that means you're feeling great, and I'm really happy that you are. I want you to keep meeting your needs and practicing self-care. If any of you want to type in your chat pod and let us know how you're feeling, we'd appreciate that. Otherwise, just look at this visual and meh from Deborah. If you are feeling meh, how can you love on yourself today, Deborah? Be extra kind to yourself. This is very important for parents also who are probably feeling like that. Lots of people are feeling meh. I understand that. Some of you are feeling good. If you're feeling good, you can maintain the levels you're currently at. How can you do that? Because we want us to go from feeling good to maybe feeling great, but we don't want us to go back down. If you're just somebody's feeling okay, if you're feeling okay, how can you make your day a tiny bit better? Because we want to go from okay to good. And then if some of us are feeling like you're struggling, then I want you to think about practicing triage for yourself. This is self-care. Maria is feeling good. That's excellent. Practice triage for areas of your life that is really suffering. It's like, where am I really needing to give myself some first aid? And what does that look like? And I want you to focus on that one area if you can, if you're struggling. And if you feel empty, we really need to know and pinpoint what is draining you, and try to create a boundary and then do one thing that kind of fills us up. I like that. Jules says she's feeling blessed. That's important. Anything that you feel that's a little that you can make yourself feel better or stay in that area, then this is good. Doing good right now, but it could change during the day. That's absolutely right, Judy. I know. I think this battery levels change all day, right? Just like our phones, unfortunately. So yeah, what can we do in the moment is important. I know. I wish we all had a crystal ball for sure. But in the event that we don't have a crystal ball, we can still do a little bit of things to help ourselves to get to a place that maybe where we can help our parents feel more certain about everything and less uncertain. Now, one of the things that I want our parents to be very, very, um, very sure of and know exactly is what is their school format going to be like. Have they been given a choice? It's my understanding that either schools wrote a letter or an email and asked parents and guardians to let them know what kind of training or what kind of instruction they are providing, and then asking parents to make the choice. Do they want to be wholly online? Is that going to be online but with option to return when it's deemed safe? Is that what the school has decided? Is the school hybrid? For example, are they using physical distancing type things and then having face-to-face plus online, or they only face-to-face with possible closures when required? There might be so many iterations and combinations. And also, is it for a finite period? Is it going to be just for the first 6 weeks, 9 weeks until the holidays? Is it going to be the rest of the year? We don't know. And I think it's really important for our parents and guardians to ask that first question, be sure that they know as to what format they're sending their child back to. What kind of experience is my child going to have to receive given the choice I have made in terms of the school format? And so as we move through our next few slides, I want you to always keep this in mind. Some of this might still be when the school is closed, for example, or some of this might be when the child is wholly online, or it might be that there's a hybrid time and some children are going a couple of days of the week, or it might be that the child is not going at all and will need to be there at certain points of their so just be careful about ensuring that a lot of our individuals know exactly what they know, what they want to be able to do when they go back to the school. I think at this point, things are not as devastating as it is right now. It's not new. We've probably been away from school. Most of our children and circumstances have now changed since maybe March or April for a lot of our students. So it might be possible at this point in time for our parents and guardians to do a self-assessment. And what I mean by that is, what has happened with our family when schools closed, when the circumstances because of quarantine or social distancing began? What happened with our family? How far? What all did we experience? Did we experience anxiety? This is an important thing for our parents to be able to just sort of self-ruminate on. As time prolonged, how did our emotions change? Did it ebb and flow? Were we really happy some days and feeling great about everything? Were we pretty, even keel? Did we have some days when we were so anxious? And then how did that impact our family? And then how did the emotions, now this is separate. This is your own emotions as a family. But then how did your child feel? How did their emotions change? And how did we manage everybody's emotions? Everybody probably had so many different emotions, and everybody was probably expressing it in different ways. And so how were those emotions managed? And what measures did we need to put in place so that our children felt like their needs were being met? And did we take care of ourselves? Was there regular self-care? And essentially, I'm wanting our parents and guardians at this point to become very best practice oriented. So I really want them to identify now, since the past 4 months or 5 months, they should be able to now identify for themselves what really worked well when it came to our psychological needs and what did not work well. And once we have that self-assessment, we can then feel motivated to keep carrying on, I would think, given that our circumstances are now continuing in a different and not so traditional a manner anymore. We might feel even a little bit more prepared because we now know some stuff and we can use that stuff to continue to succeed as this year unfolds. The next thing I want you to think about recommending is that parents do a self-assessment for things that change at home, the physical setting. Were we talking more? We've all been now living together for a longer time. Are we all talking to each other more? Did everyone's working hours need to change? Was there scheduling? Was there juggling? I'm guessing there had to be. And when we did have that kind of scheduling and juggling and sharing our technology, how did that go? And was the family able to maintain a work-life balance? And as caregivers, we talk about this all the time, don't we? We really want everybody to maintain a work-life balance. But how do you do that when your office is now your home is now your office, your workplace is no longer separate? For me personally, it was easy for me to come home, shut the door, and know that now I'm done with work and I have a actual space where I don't have to think about work. But for some people, that has not been able to, you just, I mean, my workplace is now my home, so I can't really shut down that easily. I'm so tempted to get back on the computer. I'm so tempted to do a little thing and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we really needed to have some more work-life balance as it is, and now it probably is even harder. So my hope is that we've got a way to do some work-life balancing. Was there more cooking? I'm assuming meals have changed. All of us have had to have a lot more meals at home. How did that change? Did we have a snack regime we had to put in place? Did additional attention need to be paid towards healthcare? I'm assuming at this point, a lot of us have had to do more hygienic and sanitizing type stuff in our homes, washing hands. We had to take probably more showers. We had to take care of laundry more often. I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed I get a lot more laundry nowadays. I don't understand why. I'm at home. I wouldn't think I would need to wear so many different types of clothes. And it's just me, and I still do it. So something must have changed. I mean, the everything that when we go back and assess that was normal is not normal anymore. So where did all those changes happen? Are any of us wearing masks at home? Is that happening at home? And are we having to physical distance at home? And what does that actually mean? And was there a time set aside for our own space? Because as parents and guardians, it's so easy for us to forget that there wasn't really any time for our own space. We tended to always care for our child, and we tended to do that, I'm sure, even in regular school hours. We tend to as parents, I think, definitely hover over children with special needs a lot more. And maybe they had developed a routine of our own space, but it kind of got all messed up when we had to go back to staying from home and working from home. I feel like my dishwasher has run more in quarantine. That's I mean, we don't know. We don't even know how many things are at this point we are doing that we never did before. So yeah, it's very important. I want us to see that our parents are able to identify some of these things already and say, okay, these were new routines I set up. I need to continue these routines, or I need to tweak or change these routines as we go back to school. But again, what worked well and what didn't work well. Another thing when we want to look at our self-assessment is, now these are two components we've looked at already, psychological and at home. Now there might be a self-assessment area that I want you to look at, but that's concentrating on the school. What happened? Once school shut down or something changed, what happened? Were we still able to regularly communicate with the teacher or the school personnel? That's a good question to ask ourselves and know what that mode of communication was. Were we able to email? Were we able to call them? Were they available to us through email or through phone calls? Did we get our answers in a prompt manner? Were there specific IEP or individualized education program or plan related conversations? This is different from a regular conversation, right? I mean, the IEP ones are so critical for our students with special needs, and particularly the ones who are eligible for special education, that we need to know and identify some of those themes that might happen. Was there any progress toward goal and objectives adjusted or measured? Remember, we had a school year that went at least maybe till March, which means we had about 3 months to go before, or a couple of months later. So there should have been some progress made and some objectives already met on the individualized education program. And we should have had a progress report. But then did we need to change some of those objectives? Did the goals change? And so parents really need to check on this with their schools. And did we have, if you have to go online, how was our experience with the school? Were there bandwidth issues? All the way from that to instruction quality. How was it? Was my child able to sit down and listen? And was my child able to access the technology the way the school wanted him to or her to access? Were there any technological concerns addressed, but by the school? Okay, so for example, was the school able to provide your child with an iPad if they needed one? Was your school able to provide access to a computer, or even a microphone or a headset to speak into, or a camera? I mean, if they needed additional technology to run their online schooling, was the school able to help us? And then were there any accommodations or modifications implemented? This is again language that comes directly from the individualized education program or plan. It really is things like, my child got extra time to take a test, or my child got to take a test, but then it was a shorter test, which is a modification. Well, Were those implemented? We had isolation room for a family member that tested positive. Yeah, quarantining within the household. I mean, that is a huge change that happens at a home. How did we manage, and how did your child with special needs understand quarantine? I mean, do they understand what's happening, and do they realize that there is a huge need to adhere to rules now, more now than ever before, particularly the physical hygiene rules. So, it's a lot of self-assessment. I think it's important though that our parents do this, and they do it very strategically. They do it often, and they do it on an ongoing basis based on whatever decision that needs to be made with the school. So if the school right now is completely online, then ask yourself the online questions. If your school is hybrid, ask yourself some face-to-face questions. And then if your school is something that's making itself very fluid and available, and it's telling you, okay, we are going to go face-to-face until we close, well, then how did you manage when your school was closed? I mean, the important thing is for us to have some tools now that said, okay, this worked for me and my family and for my child with special needs, and I'm going to be able to reutilize those tools no matter what the circumstances are in the next 3 or 4 months. Other things that may have happened that I want you to remind everybody to self-assess on is, was there at-home homework assigned? Gosh, I mean, imagine a lot of our students who have had to um, look at their parents as teachers. I mean, that is a very different role. And as teachers, how did our parents fare? It may not have been that easy. And what were the success rates of completion? If students were asked to complete certain projects or certain assignments, can our parents feel like their children succeeded? Do the children themselves feel like they succeeded? Was there a need for you to do some adjustments at home, like modify any equipment, or go ahead and go buy an iPad? Or did you have to get a computer? Did you have to do new things that you probably wouldn't have done if the child had continued to go to school when it came to technology and equipment? And did your school teacher or your school themselves help you with any ideas or tips? The great news that I've noticed is a lot of our teachers are getting very innovative. They've really found ways to go online on immediate notice, and that wasn't easy. And so they've got some great tips there. So maybe that is something we really need to tap into, is remind our parents to ask the teachers, hey, how are you doing this, and give me an idea. And remember, another thing is teachers themselves have children at home, so they must be managing in certain ways as well. So it might be that we can get some tips from teachers as parents of other children as well as teachers. So it's a really nice extra level of expertise you can get from your teachers. And really, at the end of the day, what was everyone's motivation levels? I mean, some days we are probably all motivated and gung-ho and so happy. And then some days we are probably not even wanting to get on our computer. So how was everyone's motivation levels 5 days a week? Did you have to figure some things out to continue your enthusiasm, and then walk toward what worked well, pardon me, and what didn't work? The most important question now we need to ask is, now that we have all this information on hand about how far we have come, what can we do to make the fall semester go better? And I don't want us to feel overwhelmed in terms of too many long-term types of things. I want us to kind of think of this as an IEP almost for ourselves, short-term objectives. So let's get through the fall semester first and see how it goes. Let's not talk about 2021 yet. It'll be helpful for us to just give ourselves some short-term objectives, some small goals, and then get to that goal, complete that goal, and then see, okay, now let's look at the next set of 6 weeks. So I think being able to give ourselves some small attainable goals will give us a little bit more of a way to be successful and feel success, so that we can continue with the next few challenges. Now, if we have to deal with school closure or long-term absence, I have some ideas and tips that I think we can share with our parents. The most important thing is to remember that our home now, if you recall or look at the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, some days are more of an effort than others. Absolutely, Michael. And this is something that I think, the days that you had to make more of an effort, what got you through that day? That's what I want our parents to be able to remember. The days that are successful, that's great, but then the days that were not successful, why were they not successful, and what did we do to make it better? And that is something that I think our parents really need to do some sort of self-assessment on and learn more from themselves than anybody else at this point. And if you're now looking at your home, you're looking at your home because you are now the least restrictive environment, or LRE. Now that's language that comes out of the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. And essentially what we're saying here is your home is now the classroom. And because it's the least restrictive environment, the idea is always been is to educate students with disabilities in a classroom with students without disabilities, correct? And that's essentially the large concept of inclusion. Now, your room, or your classroom, your little office area that you've assigned to your child has now become this least restrictive environment. So who's in charge here at home? Is it a teacher? Are you letting the teacher still call the shots? Or are you the parent or the guardian, now the teacher? What is your role in this least restrictive environment? How do you count attendance now? Are the teachers asking you to count attendance? And if they are, what does that mean? Is your school still providing any kind of access to meals or any related services, such as well as like occupational therapy, physical therapy, things they were getting typically as part of the IEP before? Is that still possible? Is that still there? Even transportation, is that still available if my child is still working from home? And is the school asking you to modify equipment or asking you to get access to some sort of modified equipment? If they are, is that equipment affordable? And is the school willing to provide virtual visits other than teaching? What I mean by this is, so you have a class day. So you have, say you meet from 8 to 10, and then that's a class meet, that's a group meet. Everybody is on Zoom or whatever technology the school is using. Now, is the school or the teacher still willing to meet with you and your child one-on-one? Okay, is that something still possible? It is possible on a regular face-to-face situation, right? We are able to go meet our teachers physically. So can we do that still through virtual? And what is the plan for transition activities? This is what I mean by this is, if the student is 16 years or older, they may be now doing some things that are work related. What that would mean is they have to maybe have some sort of work study experience. They might be going to a supported employment environment where they have a employer. Are those still happening? And if they are happening, what is the amenities available? For example, were they being transported? And if they were being transported, is that still available? What is the employer's responsibilities now when it comes to social distancing, physical distancing? Are they requiring masks on site? If there is work study continuing, how does that look like? And this is, of course, depending on the age of the student. But a lot of these things that we used to sort of take for granted before is something we now need to question and ask about and learn about as we decide about our home being the sort of the setting, the hub from which our child is going to operate. And then yet there's all these outside things that might need to still be in place. What percentage should teachers be in charge of a child? I think that again depends on the school. So obviously in a typical school environment, we probably have, the regular school schedule, the 8 to 3 or whatever the school schedule was. At this point, I think a lot of teachers are deciding what works best for them. And it might be that, I think it's a good question that a parent can ask the teacher, what is the percentage of class time? In my talking with teachers, I know some of that has changed. The way they deliver instruction has changed. The amount of time that they spend delivering that instruction has changed. And teachers of all the people definitely understand that sitting in front of a computer is never going to be easy for any child, particularly children with special needs. So I would say that's a good question to ask, because now the teacher probably has a new schedule, a different schedule than they would have had for face-to-face. So it's worthwhile asking that question of the school. I feel like it's a local level decision that might be now made that we need to check on. I hope that helps, Imelda. Teaching responsibilities, are parents, guardians having to, because I came to the school year 2020, and I had, learning objectives that I wanted my students with special needs to meet. Then I decided, oh, great, now I have to give it to a parent because I can't be seeing that child face to face. Now, what are my learning objectives now? How do I change it for this child? For example, if there was some information in that learning objective that required lab time, the child had to be in your school setting where they had to go into a physical lab situation and do some activities, hands-on activities there, which we clearly do not have that equipment anymore at home. We do not have a way to emulate or simulate that. What do we do? As my understanding is that teachers need to deliver at least 3 hours. Okay, thank you, Jules. Yeah, that, not sure how that translates to special needs kids. I think one of the most reasonable questions that our parents need to ask, all our parents need to know right away, is what is your plan for my child? Okay, very important. This is not just for the child or for all children in the school. Okay, I've got the school schedule. You guys have told me that this is a hybrid setting. You just ask them, this is my letter, this is my choice. Okay, what can I reasonably expect to happen with my child given that this is how the school is going to be reopened? I think that's a reasonable question to ask. So absolutely, TEA's guidelines are not for children with special needs. I mean, those are, remember, we're talking about individualized help. That's what our children always receive. When they have a disability and are eligible, the question we can reasonably ask is, what kind of individualized um, setting, instruction do you have in mind for my child? Okay, very important to ask. And if you have more than one child in the system, ask for all of those children by name and by age, because each child has several different needs. Okay, so identify those. I hope that helps, Jules, as well. And communicate with teachers about class progress. How did I need to talk to the teacher? How am I, as a parent, objectively to observe my child's progress? I would say, oh, my child is doing great, but then the teacher might say, no, that's not quite what the objective is. So we need to check more often than we realize on what we mean as my teaching responsibility and what all I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to grade, for example? um, how often can I ask for assistance, and like things like assistive technology, like an iPad, like extra equipment, and how much is too much or how much is too little? Okay. At some point, somebody's going to tell you, no, we can't do that, but we'd like to know that. Don't just keep asking and being turned down. Instead of being turned down, I would rather know exactly what the reality is and how much I should keep asking, or whether you want me to just quit asking because it's not going to happen. I think that's important for our parents to know. Is I'd like our schools to be as realistic as possible. So I'd really like our parents to ask the question, get the answer, and at least feel more definite about the answer, and be feeling more confident. Okay, this is not going to happen for sure, but this can still happen. For example, there's still transportation that we can take advantage of, but it may not be able to take us to the work-based setting, but we can still go to school. Those are the kinds of things we can at least sort of identify and sort of nail down as what we can for sure expect to happen in the fall semester. um, did we have to, as parents, keep questioning all our capabilities? Like, my gosh, I mean, there are so many, it's just me. I'm a single mom. How do I manage, with my 3 children, 2 of whom have special needs? Language, some of us don't speak English very well. And if all this instruction is in English, how am I supposed to teach my child at home when I don't speak the language well? I don't have access to technology. I just don't. Or I don't have access to Wi-Fi. What am I supposed to do? So this is the way we had to ask these questions. We really needed to sort of do a self-check and then go back to our schools and say, this is what I have. Tell me what we can do given the parameters from which I can operate. So difficult for parents that have lost employment. I know, absolutely. uh, very stress inducing, and that's why I specifically ask that you all do this mental and health kind of checkup with your parents on a daily, not on a daily basis, but as regularly as possible, because we'd like to have some more conversations about beyond just caring for your child with special needs. What else do we need to take into account, and what else do we need to know about, so that we can probably bring some services into play? I know there are telehealth counseling services that are available. I know there are parent support groups right now that are available that are helping parents specifically through COVID-19 type issues. The reality is we need to look at different resources, but we also need to look at parent as a whole, not just as a parent of a child child with special needs. So I'm hoping that, the communication between parents and schools is important. Absolutely. I have students on my caseload who are parents who are also. Absolutely. Judy, that's a great point. If our parents who are needing to be in this role also have their own special needs, I know lots of adults I know who have had a diagnosis of either autism or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and they themselves have their own concerns, and then trying to put that into perspective while they're working with their children. Lots of situations we have to deal with, absolutely. Um, One of the things that I would like to let you guys know is tell parents to talk to other parents as well. If there are parents out there who are struggling, but we don't have an answer for them, some parents have found an answer. And that's why I like that self-assessment piece so much, is that then that parent can go ahead and talk to other parents. We learn so much better from a lived-in experience. So I would really recommend you all to sort of try to think about getting together if you can, some information, like contact information or a group together, and you let them at least know that this person has figured some things out. Maybe you'd like to talk to them, and of course get the permission from the other parent who says, okay, I'll be willing to support. What I love about the special education community is that they really are very supportive of each other, and they've always been, even well before any crisis. And so this is a good time for us to tap back into that. So when we don't have the expertise and when we don't have the lived in experience, it's really helpful for us to refer us back to people who have had that experience, who feel successful and feel confident about passing that information on to other parents. So I hope that's a good tip that everybody would like to tap into at the very least at the end of this presentation. Also, if I had to have an IEP meeting, this is, remember, these IEP meetings are mandatory, right? They're supposed to happen as part of the law. My child is 3, it's very difficult, I know. Pete, so one of the things, Pete, I talk about is, the younger the age, the more harder it really is going to be at this point for the virtual environment. A couple of things is, I'd like to remind children, I remember that young children at this age love to be like their parent, like their dad. I'm going to sit at a computer like my dad, so if you could have things like that. If you're sitting next to me, you're my colleague, you're my teammate, we're going to work together. Here's your computer. Here's my computer. I'm going to work for 5 minutes. Maybe you can do the same. I don't know. Maybe we can have that kind of conversation with our three-year-old. Just remind them that they're a team player. They're not just a child. They are a colleague now in the office. You're getting really good with your puppets, getting them to talk with puppets. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what we need to do, Pete, is just try to remind the child that they are more than a child now. They are responsible students, which is hard at the age of 3, but maybe that'll help. I hope that helps, Pete. Also, with the IEP meetings, what has changed? Are we virtual now? Are we virtual? If we are virtual, does that mean that I get on a Zoom meeting with you? What kind of technology do I need? Is it Teams? Is it Zoom? Is it who sends me the invitation? Can I just click on it? Do I need a microphone? Do I need a camera? How am I going to access the hard copies of things? And, those are just questions that we normally would have just gotten things handed to us at a meeting, but now how do we access the virtual information? Is it still face-to-face? If it's face-to-face, what does that entail? How are we signing off on things? I mean, there's obviously some electronic ways to sign things, but what does that mean? Any information for children being homeschooled who have an IEP? Basically, a lot of what I'm talking about, Liz, is essentially homeschooling at this point. So I'm hoping that a lot of my points would sort of translate. Also, parents probably are already aware of some of the homeschool rules that have been in place because their child is being homeschooled for a longer time than this. So it's important to go back and have them reiterate how anything might have changed given that they have an IEP and have still been homeschooled. I hope that works, Liz. So some things may have changed, but not a lot. I'm thinking as far as some of the homeschooling, certainly some of the virtual responsibilities may have changed. Also, options for disagreement or mediation. If I had disagreed with something on the IEP, can I still do that? Are we still eligible for a 10-day mediation? That's part of the law. How often do we meet now? Also, if I have to have my child in virtual classes, Is there a same teacher? Is there a different teacher? What kind of equipment would I need? Are we still giving any kind of related services that are part of the IEP? And then the transition and the work study. Remember, this IEP is a long document with all this stuff specifically listed for a parent to be able to find by keyword. So if they can, they need to go and ask a question per topic that's part of their IEP. And now on my IEP, how will progress be measured? Access reports and IEP documents. Remember, there's lots of reports as part of that IEP document that just gets into that IEP document that gets handed to a parent, usually every 6 weeks, every 10 weeks, whenever they have a progress meeting. How am I going to access that? We use Google. Yeah, Google Hangouts, I've heard, is very popular. The internet is a challenge. The parents can have an IEP when they request one. Great. Thank you, Judy. I appreciate that. And I like that. A visual schedule, Pete, for your 3-year-old. That's a good idea. Also, one thing I like to remind parents is if you have older siblings who are sitting on a computer and learning, have them, sort of be a mentor for the younger child and tell them, hey, this is how I'm learning in school. This part of it is fun. This part of it is where I had to make my adjustments. Let me teach you. So sort of give that little mentor role to your older child, and maybe the older child can help your younger child adjust to this environment. If that's a little bit of help, Pete, as well. And return to a face-to-face plan. Is there one? And if there is a return to a face-to-face plan, how is that going to change? Other components that might be part of the IEP is your long-term goals. Usually there's a yearly worth of goals. And then there are short-term objectives. So how have those changed? Have there been any adjustments made? Have we had to do some accommodations? So for example, if you have asked me to be on a 1-hour Zoom meeting today for my child with special needs, is that instruction now 30 minutes today, 30 minutes tomorrow? So are we doing accommodations in that way? Do we have challenges now when it comes to assessment? Has that changed? Because if you did assessments or you did ways you tested were different when you did face-to-face, well, then how are you doing those virtually? And what kind of classes are you asking my child to now take so that we can meet some of their new goals if they've adjusted those goals? Do we have new instructors? You probably do. And it's important for your child to be prepared for a different face, maybe more often than they're used to. And remember, some of our children with special needs, they love routine. Routine is very different nowadays, right? So we really need to get our child used to whoever they see on camera. They might even see a background that's a little bit more colorful, or they might see a completely different aspect of their teacher that they've never seen before. They might be used to a teacher walking around in the classroom, and now suddenly that teacher is stationary. There's so many things that have changed. I'm also asking parents to maybe do like practice Zoom things with their children so they can get used to somebody speaking. So they can get used to wearing a microphone on their if they need to on their ears. They can get used to talking to a camera. They can get used to sitting. Make sure your child has a comfortable spot to sit on. I'm recommending that if you have that big exercise ball, use that for your children, because those are probably more comfortable, and also give your child a place to shake and work off some of that physical energy that might be keeping them from getting really restless. So things like that. Build in a way of having them do like breaks that for want of a better word, give their butt a break. So just things like that. You might have to do that yourself. And I like the idea of telling parents, how have you adjusted to working from home, and maybe put some of those things in place for your child as well, because your child is also now essentially working from home. I have parents deliver reinforcers. Okay. I use many sensory light toys and move to engage students. Singing the child favorite songs and teaching parents how to teach. Very important. And what classes and what curriculum modifications would be needed, if your child had a certain amount of lab work, or they needed to go somewhere and watch something, a field visit, or listen to a guest speaker. Has that still changed? Has that still happened? Or will there be something different to take the place of that? And how fair is this plan? Is my child being really given the best shot they can at completing some of these IEP goals? How do we access some of these resources and appropriate services? Is the school providing questions like instructional support? Are they still helping us evaluate? Which means that if they had to, because evaluation is supposed to take place as part of the individualized education program, diagnosis is supposed to happen, and then continuing evaluation is supposed to happen. So is that still being provided by the school? Transportation and accessible transition activities, like I said, like work-based study stuff, is that still accessible? If you've got to physically distance, what are those amenities on site? Like, how we have some big now we have some big red circles that tell us thank you for standing here and having that kind of visual aid is very helpful, but then what is your school providing for our child? If our child is being asked to wear a mask or have hygiene and personal protective equipment provisions, what are they and what are those requirements if my child goes back to school? How often do they have to wash hands and sanitizing stations? Now remember, hand washing has always been an interesting mental health related habit as well. So a child who has special needs, how are they with water texture, with 20 seconds of actually washing your hands? How does that look like? So you might have to help your child practice certain things that they may not normally practice or they may not normally do as part of their everyday routine, or do it in a way that's a little bit more sanitizing now than it was before. Also remember, some of these sanitizing solutions that you put on your hand has a certain smell. So some of our children with disabilities may react to the smell. So be careful about some of those things, and reminding the children that these are all things they'll have to do, but get used to the types of stimulus that might be new or different or even shocking to them. Also like related services. And by the way, our children are probably losing some of the learning. So what is the school's plan to prevent or stop learning loss? Or if the learning loss has already happened, what are we going to do to replenish that learning? Yeah, our children who are obsessive with hand washing. I've thought about, Tamara, and I don't know. It's a good question. My concern with that would be if when it gets excessive. I think I'm hoping that teachers who know their children well enough know some of these concerns of theirs and have already had a plan in place to deal with somebody like that and deal with their habit of helping them adjust to like maybe a time schedule or something. It's also not a bad time, I think, for some of our other children to learn from that one child. I think it's nothing wrong with having our special needs teachers, the teachers of our students with special needs, just talk to each other and say, I can have this child teach this other child about hand washing. I mean, it's not a bad idea to take advantage of some of these good habits that our children already have that may have been considered excessive in the past, but now because they're in our school, we know how to regulate and help them, but then work it towards our advantage. I've given you some resources. We have written some blogs in the past about managing social distancing. And so I would encourage you to go back and look at that blog and see if that helps. I also would really encourage our parents to manage routine. And we have a blog there that manages routine. Thanks, Tamara. Yeah, and then also plan for your child with special needs to manage behavior at home. That continues to be a concern. So definitely give our parents that resource. And then all the different topics that I gave you, I have some resources on hand. One thing I will point out to you is that I actually have a Facebook post on one of the resources I gave you. I'd like you to I'll highly encourage your parents to look into becoming what do you call it, a follower of this organization. They are a transition related organization out of Sam Houston, and they have some great information on managing at home, particularly older kids who are in the transition piece. So definitely look at that resource and I encourage you to follow them on Facebook, because you can really get some good information. Like just recently, they posted about life skills at home and how parents can teach children to develop their life skills. Things like, budgeting and cooking and laundry and, independent life skills that we always need our children to know. This is a good time. What resources are on FP? It's on that list I sent you. So definitely look it up, Tamara. It's on the download. Okay. Planning for special healthcare needs. Your child might have some healthcare needs that you've already needed to meet. And by this, I mean physical healthcare needs. But I think it's important for us to really think about incorporating all the, I guess, the extra I don't know, what would you call it? Like the extra cautions and precautions we needed to take now because of the COVID-19 situation. So there is a blog that we've written in the past about working with medical personnel, and that still includes. Raymond had a question that maybe Rachel or Coral can answer. And then talk to provider about immune compromise concerns. If your child, for example, is going through things like chemotherapy or radiation, or is diabetic, or has obesity, these are all conditions that make your child more susceptible to COVID-19, or these are definitely treatment areas that may be compromising their immune system. So definitely talk to the provider about what my child's healthcare risks might be. I want our parents to weigh these decisions before they decide to go back to school, okay? Things are just harder now when it comes to going back to school, and with the risk of COVID-19. Continue healthcare visits virtually if possible. Certainly, I think a lot of our hospitals are still encouraging person to person, and you can go in there with a mask and things like that. I also like the idea of allowing our child to get used to seeing strangers in masks, wearing a mask themselves, going into strange places, maintaining the physical distance. The more you model these kinds of behaviors for your child, the more likely the child is not going to be shocked when he or she is asked to do that in the school setting. Okay, so take advantage of some of these situations where you have to wear a mask and go into a setting and ask for services, and your child is watching you do this. Okay, and continue all medications as normal. But how the health room would be managed, would the sick be separated? Okay, that is excellent. The school advised you, Kelly, on that? Or did the doctor advise you? Also continue all medications as normal. And then provide for outdoor exercise with mask and physical distancing where feasible. Because even if you go to a park and things like that, it is still important that our child continues to physically distance. And really, if you have home health care, just look at the different assess and risks of somebody coming into your home and providing health care, if your healthcare needs are met, like respite care and things like that. When you have somebody coming to take care of your child, then you want to make sure that whatever your exposure for your child and yourself would be, whether or not that is well managed. All right, so the next setting we're going to be talking about is staying engaged and advocate. I want you to really opt for remote learning if your health of the child dictates it. Okay, remote learning is hard, but it's doable and it'll work for your child. So really consider that, because if the health is going to be compromised, I think it's a great idea for us to really opt for remote learning, no matter what the difficulties might be with that. High expectations of quality of instruction. Do not, so yeah, if the teacher says they're going to be on for 3 hours a day, there's nothing wrong with all of us expecting high quality of instruction, no matter how much time or scheduling changes might be. And be willing to ask new and repeat those questions until a satisfactory answer is received and you have a plan in place. Also, when in doubt, call for an IEP meeting. That is still your right. You have to screen all individuals that come into the home. Yeah, absolutely, Nami Hall. No. So, and then when you can see that everybody is making the effort, the teachers are making the effort, the school is, then remind our parents to express appreciation, because everybody's learning at this point. So really, if you feel like your child is getting good quality instruction and good quality care despite the circumstances, then we really should be expressing our appreciation and always recognizing when the genuine effort is made. Also, as parents, we need to be willing to let something slide, because if it is in the best interest of the child, maybe some IEP objectives don't need to be met this year. It's okay. We can always go back and revisit some of these given time. But right now, if we need to let something go, say a math objective or a science objective, or even something to do with a work-based setting that cannot happen right now, then it's okay. It's okay. Just let's adjust some things now. Like I said, short-term goals that are attainable and where you feel successful is much better than worrying about your child's long-term goals that hopefully will still be met at some point. I really like the idea of asking for life skills improvement, self-care, and work-related things. Teaching your child to dress appropriately for an interview, talking in a way that is professional, teaching them to to write, clean, really neat handwriting. All of these are important things that we still teach our child at home. Okay, so ask our teachers for some guidance on life skills, and tap into your social network if you can. Ask people. Thank you, Deborah. Ask people, on Facebook. It doesn't matter. Just ask, check in, and say, how are you managing your child at home? Also, you can also look at things like math, reading, English language arts, and I have some resources for you on there for what parents can use for some subject related stuff that you can download. Advocating for yourself. Ask yourself as a parent, can this be done? Can I do it alone? If I cannot do it alone, can I get some help? Do I need some professional help from outside? Like virtual tutoring is now available. Maybe I can talk to some virtual tutors and they'll be willing to tutor my child through some of these things. Am I seeing learning gains as I define it for my child? Am I feeling success or failure? Do we need to call a meeting? Do I need to call a meeting with the school? Can I go ahead and seek some help from parental support groups? Absolutely. You should definitely ask yourself that question and tap into support groups right now. They're all there out there willing to help us. In what ways can I give myself some psychological boosts? So you can go back to that graphic and just think about how I can take care of myself through this process. Very important for parents to feel heard. And are we handling the stress well? And really, what is next? Because every day we have a question that comes up, what's next? And we should have hopefully a few answers now that we are asking the right questions at the school. Quick review, remind our parents, guardians to self-assess. Let's take advantage of the fact that we've learned some things already. I want them to ask many questions and persist until your answers are obtained and a plan is in place. Remember to be flexible. We're all learning and adapting. Let's let something slide. Again, that's a question Ivan has. Maybe one of you guys can answer that question. Coral or Rachel. Be appreciative when schools and teachers are making all those efforts, and advocate for the child and especially for ourselves. As parents and guardians, we cannot in any way compromise on self-care. There's a lot of factors here. All of us are feeling anxious. All of us are scared. All of us are just so uncertain of the future and just of our own health. So take good care of ourselves, do what we need to do to maintain our own physical and mental health. And then while we're doing that, healthcare for our children as well. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. If anybody has any other questions, I'll be right here and I'll be happy to answer those. My contact information is on the handout and then as well as Rachel's. So if you guys have continuing to have any of you ladies and gentlemen who are on there today would like to have some further questions answered, I'll try to find you a resource or give you some answers in the future. I hope this helps some.
Thanks, Dr. Mahadevan, and thanks you everyone for attending. We're getting close to that top of the hour, so we are going to be on kind of closing out and discussing just a few brief items before we go. But thank you all for attending today's session. We are providing continuing education credit as well as a general certificate of completion for those that are interested. And in order to receive a certificate of completion or CE credit from either social work, LPC, LMFT, case manager, patient advocate, or family life educators CE credit, you will find a purple continue education button that will be placed on the event website. And so we have posted that event link several times throughout today's webinar chat. In there, I also posted the link as well as Coral recently. You will need to complete our evaluation survey and then make sure to carefully go through the evaluation and instructions to complete the evaluation in order to receive an automatically generated email certificate. If you have any issues with receiving your certificate or any questions, my email address is posted in the chat pod at rbrowner@ag.tamu.edu. My contact is also on the presentation slides, which can be found on the event page, as well as additional resources are found on that event page. And there were several questions about, can we share this training and information resources to your military service providers or families out in your communities? Absolutely. Please, we encourage you to share this information, share this recording of the webinar, which will be placed in the next 2 to 3 business days on the event webpage. Feel free to share that information with your colleagues and families. If we can go to the next presentation slide, I just want to briefly talk about we're going to be hosting starting next month. We are going to be having our inaugural Military Family Readiness Academy series. And on September 16th, our very first session will be on Disaster and Hazard Readiness 101. And so please get connected and RSVP to log in to learn more about our Military Family Readiness Academy and our session series on disaster preparedness for providers and military families. I've posted that link in the chat pod as well for you. Um, and then also mark your calendar after the MFRA, that September 17th, the day after the MFRA session. We are going to be hosting our part 2 session on working with difficult clients. So if you are familiar with our military caregiving trainings and professional development opportunities, we hosted a working with difficult clients session back in May of this year. We're going to be doing a part 2 session on it, on communication power moves. And so when a situation becomes escalated, it's common for us to freeze, fight back, or retreat from a situation. So while providing services to individuals, we need to use our environment and communication skills to find and maintain safety. So learn more about communication, power moves, working with difficult clients. We're going to identify um, how to use crisis prevention intervention and handling and verbal judo methods during this session. We'll also learn about increasing our active listening and responding, um, and developing a holding environment skills, and then practicing skills through the use of case study presentations. So that communication power moves part 2 session is at 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, September 17th. So please get connected, stay tuned with all of our resources and information, not only from our military caregiving community, but our learning network as a whole. So we have some great resources and information from our military family learning network, not only on caregiving issues, but also on personal finance, nutrition, wellness, family development, and community capacity building. So stay tuned, join us, continue to join us, and we really appreciate everyone for attending today's session, providing feedback and comments in the chat pod, and again for Dr. Mahadevan's expertise and guidance throughout today's session. So we will stay on for a few minutes for those of you to gather all the links in the chat pod. And if you have any last minute questions for our team or Dr. Mahadevan, we will be on for a couple of minutes and then we'll be closing out. So thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Rachel, so much. And thanks again, Dr. Mahadevan, for your incredible expertise on this very important and very timely topic as well. Thanks, everybody who contributed questions and comments in the chat pod as well. I did want to remind everyone that all of the links are available on the event page that were referenced throughout today's webinar. So please download the slides. You'll find all of those blog links that Dr. Mahadevan referenced throughout the session there. They are hyperlinked, as well as the entire resources segment as well. So we also, if you're just tuning back in, we did record today's session, and that recording will be available for review and for sharing with anybody who may be interested. This is free and open access on our event page as well. So that's your one-stop shop. But of course, if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rachel and the military caregiving team at rbrowner@ag.tamu.edu. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you again soon, especially for our Military Family Readiness Academy in the fall, as well as all of our upcoming sessions. Take care and have a great day and stay safe.